A Light Within Darkness, Chapter 16b, Fan Fiction by Azazyel. Sorry, I should have probably been sitting outside waiting for you. Here, give me a drop of your blood so I can attune you into the array permanently. Once I got her permission to enter the wards, I helped her drag in a large cart filled with building supplies and, more importantly, a couple of mattresses that weren't stained with a variety of bodily fluids that we could sleep and meditate upon. I don't know what those other cultivators are smoking, but lying down to cultivate on a jade/rock bed did absolutely nothing for your concentration and energy absorption, other than make your back and ass sore. And in the argument that the jade bed was some heaven and earth treasure, you can just as easily stuff a mattress with something like demon beast feathers to get the same damned effect. Thankfully, setting up some simple square rooms with the large square plywood boards equivalent and some other wooden beams was rather easily, and rather than going through the effort of painting it and dealing with the fumes, we simply nailed some blankets to the plywood walls in the interior of our rooms to decorate. Wow, just a nice soft blue wall makes it feel so much more at home, I said as I finally collapsed into the sinfully soft mattress and just stared up at the ceiling of my room that had a white blanket nailed to it. Then I realized why I was so comfortable. I had basically unconsciously recreated my old apartment's tiny bedroom from my past life down to where I had a writing desk at the foot of my feet and a dresser that was close to the head of my bed in order to block out the early morning sunlight. I couldn't help but sigh as I felt intense melancholy at the simple life I had before the intense desire for the simplicity of my bland earth was swallowed up by my prior mental defenses that saw such weakness as anathema to being a successful cultivator. "Jake, you all right? I heard you sighing," Ellesmere asked as she moved aside the drape we both had as makeshift doors. "Well, a hot elf definitely makes this situation a lot better," I thought before I sat up a bit and replied. "Yeah, just the bed is surprisingly comfortable, especially in comparison to our prior little hideaway." Ellesmere nodded and then gracefully strode into my room and crawled into my bed, and lay her chin on my shoulder as she kept eye contact with me the whole time. How big could those arrays get? Could they scale up to defend something like a Craftworld ship? Remembering the literally continent-sized massive spaceships a good deal of the Eldar race lived upon, I did some mental gymnastics before firmly nodding as the mountain ranges my array systems were engineered for could reach the size of planets themselves. Do I have such arrays? Yes, I do, but the biggest issue would be how they could fuel the arrays, as it would require a great deal of psychic energy or otherwise would need to be by warp storms for them passively absorb enough energy to sustain the undoubtedly great number of abilities your people will obviously want. Ellesmere nodded as she understood that for Eldar being around warp storms was just asking for. She who thirsts to begin nibbling at their souls, even if my arrays could block an eldritch entity like her from doing it, it would only cost more energy, making going around the warp storms a net negative in energy. Think we could get our own supersized ship from your people? I asked as although it was not possible for Eldar to rely on my arrays to guard their ships on their own, I could on the other hand control the arrays and be able to fuel the arrays in much greater ways so I could use the continent-sized ship to make a beachhead into the Eye of Terror where the chaos god Slaanesh was born so I can absorb the area's rich warp energies. A whole craft world? I cannot say, as the methods you can provide to my people have unmentionable value, but to be blunt, we don't have any free ships of similar size, and to build a new one with my diminished people would take literally centuries to complete," she said wryly as she wrapped her legs around mine and seemingly giggled at being able to so freely enjoy the warmth I provided and a general affection, without Slaanesh's attention being drawn to her having some joy in her life. "Doesn't need to be half as big as a craft world, really. I just want something that can fly, and having a ship you can control as we seed the galaxy with spatial passageways would frankly be the most convenient." I grumbled, and she nodded. "In that case, it's certainly possible, and with us being in the southern half of the galaxy, it's possible we could catch the Bealtan Craft World Armada, but they are the most militant of my Craft World people, and you will need to prove the greater warrior for them to even entertain the thought of negotiating with them, regardless of your feats of avoiding she who thirsts gaze. Not to mention was the fact that I would need to get out into space using a human vessel to communicate with them to begin with, and who is to say they wouldn't just blow up the ship I come to speak with them rather than speaking with a dirty monkey as they will undoubtedly see me as. In the end, I needed more power, I needed to reach the true realm, the next real, and before I could bother imagining running around between worlds as this one was just fine for my needs. "Get some sleep, Jake. I see the weight of the battle with the genestealer still weighs upon you mentally, and I shall be here for you while you dream. Ellesmere gently coaxed, and I pulled her svelte form closer to me as I relaxed into my bed.